Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for being here. I will now read what I am instructed to read. This is a public hearing on Bill 44-16, Retirement Fossil Fuel Investments Restrictions, which would prohibit the Board of Investment Trustees and the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust Board of Trustees from investing in certain businesses holding certain amounts of fossil fuel reserves under certain circumstances, require the boards to research and adopt a socially responsible investing policy, and generally amend the law governing the investment of funds held in trust for the Employees Retirement System and the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust. A joint GOT&E committee work session will be scheduled tentatively for Thursday, February 2nd, 2017. For everyone scheduled to testify this evening, please bring your copies of your written testimony to the clerk at this time if you have not already done so. Persons wishing to submit additional comments should do so by the close of Monday, January 30th, so that your views can be included in the material which staff will prepare for the committee's consideration. For those of you here for the first time, know that each of you are entitled to 3 minutes. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, a yellow light will go on. At 3 minutes, a red light will go on and a trap door underneath. Okay, don't mess with us here. We got 37 people we need to hear from this evening, and we do want to be respectful of everybody, as I know you all will be respectful of everybody. There's undoubtedly a divergence of view with respect to this matter, unlike anything else we do in our county, and we will all be respectful of the diversity of view as we do our work this year. Before we begin, I want to read a statement from Councilmember George Leventhal, who cannot be with us this evening. Councilmember Leventhal will not be attending tonight's public hearing because he is serving as a judge for the University of Maryland School of Public Policy's Climate Action Challenge. Mr. Leventhal will be listening to and judging ideas from graduate students for steps that can be taken at the global, national, state, and local levels to address climate change. Walt Harris, Councilmember Leventhal's senior legislative aide, is in attendance and will report a summary of tonight's testimony back to Mr. Leventhal. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. Let's call up the first panel. Jeffrey Weisner, Yvette, I am terrible with names, ladies and gentlemen, so if I butcher them, please, I apologize. Yvette Cuffey, Paul Hilton, Jeffrey Buttle, Dr. Kermit Liepensberger, Joan Fiddler. Mr. Wisner, you get the honor of leading us off. That's the other thing, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. There's a little button there where that red light goes on. Push it when you speak, and then push it when you're done speaking so that all the mics work. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Weisner. I'm a Bethesda resident, and I'm the steering committee president of 350 Montgomery County, or 350 MoCo, on whose behalf I am testifying today. 350 MoCo is a local group affiliated with the global 350.org climate movement. 350 groups seek, through activism and education, to create action on the greatest crisis of our time, the crisis of global climate change. 350 MoCo has been advocating on the issue of fossil fuel divestment for some time, and other members and I have had the pleasure of meeting with many of you to discuss it. We've also heard from the over 2,000 county residents who have signed our divestment petitions and cards, and the many local environmental, labor, and community groups who support divestment. Over 600 institutions have already chosen fossil fuel divestment. They span a global array of foundations, local governments, religious organizations, colleges and universities, and nonprofits. Examples include the Episcopal Church, the Canadian Medical Association, the Field Museum in Chicago, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the University of Maryland, and the District of Columbia Public Pension System. Organizations and institutions collectively worth over $3.4 trillion are now on the divestment path. While divesting entities are not all at the same level of divestment, all have made a moral choice to stop investing in the companies whose core business model endangers our future. What lessons might we draw from the growth of fossil fuel divestment? First, divestment is serious. Fossil fuel divestment has exploded since the movement began in early 2012. Divestment is no longer a fringe movement, but is part of the mainstream of investment options. Second, divestment is possible. All of the institutions I mentioned have financial obligations, and their boards must exercise fiduciary responsibility over the management of their assets. Yet, they have all found paths to divestment that maintain financial stability for their institutions. We see no reason our county cannot do the same. Third, divestment matters. Some say divestment is merely symbolic and therefore unimportant, but symbols are important expressions of our values. Recent controversies over the Confederate flag and other symbols of racism show the power of symbols to shape debate. Our county has enacted many strong climate policies, from clean energy for county operations to the Green Bank to the Office of Energy and Sustainability, many of which were spearheaded by members here today. We should be proud of our leadership in these areas. But when we then continue to invest our public pensions, funded in part by residents' tax dollars, in companies whose actions are completely incompatible with our goals on climate, we can weaken our stance and open the door for others to discount our leadership. 350 MoCo includes climate scientists and financial professionals among its members. But you do not need to be a climate scientist to understand that climate change is a crisis for us all, and you don't need to be a financial professional to know that it is wrong to profit from fossil fuel companies whose actions have contributed and continue to contribute to the climate crisis. 350 MoCo's members urge the Council to divest from fossil fuels. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Cuffey.
Good evening. I'm Yvette Cuffey, Secretary-Treasurer of UFCW Local 1994 McGeo. I am an employee of Montgomery County, and I participate in the Employees Retirement System. I'm here to read the testimony of Gino Wren, President of UFCW Local 1994. I am the chair of the Board of Investment Trustees of the Employees Retirement System, the pension fund for county government employees with assets of $3.8 billion. I am also a member of the Board of Trustees for the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefit Trust for employees of county government, Montgomery County Public Schools, and Montgomery College with assets of $700 million. The chair of that board is Linda Von Bargen, who is a college retiree. She and I have written a memo to the council to be included in the record for this hearing. Our two boards voted unanimously to oppose Bill 4416, which mandates divestment from certain fossil fuel companies. I have a simple message. We are doing a great job for our employees, our retirees, our taxpayers. The 10-year return for our pension fund is in the top 1% of the Wilshire Large Public Funds universe. We respectfully request that you do not intrude in our fiduciary process by mandating legislation. I say this as one who is deeply concerned about the climate change. In fact, our union's executive board voted to support divestment. But for our pension fund, I wear the hat of a fiduciary. This is a serious responsibility and runs smack up against Bill 4416. The county attorney's office wrote on November 15th that to require the board to divest from fossil fuel companies, the council would have to change the standard of care in the county code. The code says that our duty of loyalty as fiduciaries is to act only in the best interest of the participants and their beneficiaries. We are not permitted to use plan assets to promote the social, environmental, or other goals we may favor. Any weakening of this standard of care would be a serious mistake because it could lead to a decision driven by politics and not prudent investment principles. There are other problems with Bill 4416. First, the bill is unworkable. It requires us to jump through too many hoops and split too many hairs in deciding whether to divest from a company. Second, the bill requires us to develop a policy on socially responsible investing, but we have long had such a policy. Third, this council is a national leader in moving toward clean energy and energy efficiency. That's real action, and more can be done. Divestment is symbolism, and we are way past that. Fourth, Bill 4416 requires divestment from fossil fuel companies, but not from what those companies produce. The county still uses fossil fuels to heat and cool our buildings, pave our roads, fuel our vehicles, like the ride-on buses, snowplows, and heavy equipment that many members drive. The county is moving fast toward renewables, but we are not there yet. In sum, we share the deep concern about climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cuffey. Mr. Hilton.
Good evening. My name is Paul Hilton, and I'm a partner and portfolio manager at Trillium Asset Management in Boston, one of the oldest independent investment advisors exclusively focused on sustainable and responsible investing, started in 1982. I'm a chartered financial analyst charter holder, a member of the CFA Institute, and have over 20 years of investment experience. Trillium has seen growing interest in our fossil fuel-free investment portfolios, which currently represent approximately 50% of our $2 billion in assets under management and are among some of the fastest-growing investment approaches at the firm. Last year, the Department of Labor provided new guidance to fiduciaries for ERISA-governed pensions regarding the incorporation of environmental, social, and governance factors, which states that private retirement plans, quote, need not treat commercially reasonable investments as inherently suspect or in need of special scrutiny merely because they take into consideration environmental, social, or other such factors, end quote. In our experience, fossil fuel-free investing has been a credible investment approach. Since 2007, our fossil fuel-free core strategy has outperformed the S&P 1500 benchmark by 20 basis points annually gross of fees. Including our investment management fees, the net returns were 70 basis points below the benchmark annually. Several recent independent studies have shown that investors can invest fossil fuel-free without major negative impacts on portfolio performance. On the issue of risk, a 2016 study by Aperio Group estimated that excluding all fossil fuel companies from 1988 through 2013, a 25-year period, would have an annual tracking error from its Russell 3000 benchmark of just over 0.75%, but which has virtually no risk in terms of volatility. The Aperio studies show that over the 25-year period, the fossil fuel-free portfolio outperformed its benchmark by a fraction of a percent. Aperio also reported that over rolling 10-year time periods, the carbon-free portfolio outperformed its benchmark 68% of the time. An advisor partner study also determined that removing energy stocks from a well-diversified portfolio has little impact on investment risk. MSCI, a leading provider of investment decision support tools, looked at the impact of excluding companies owning carbon reserves from one of its index funds, the MSCI All-Country World Index. It determined that over a 5-year period, the active return differential was 1.2% better for the same index without fossil fuel investments. At Trillium, we utilize portfolio optimization software to help us manage the exclusion of fossil fuel stocks from a portfolio. This process helps us to find substitute stocks that closely correlate with fossil fuel stocks in terms of specific exposures, like beta and capitalization, and limit our overall tracking error versus the benchmark. Some of our substitutes include companies that provide clean technology and energy efficiency products. A rapidly growing number of investment managers and index funds are also offering competitive fossil fuel-free investment options. Most managers will allow a fossil fuel screening overlay to a separate account with no additional fees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Buttle.
Good evening, Council President Berliner and members of the County Council. I'm Jeff Buttle, President of the Montgomery County Career Firefighters Association. We represent approximately 1,500 active and retired career firefighters and paramedics here in Montgomery County, Maryland. I'm here in really two capacities tonight, one as the president of our union that represents the firefighters and paramedics, and also as my role as a trustee on the Board of Investment Trustees for the Employee Retirement System, and as a trustee on the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefit Trust. As a trustee, those positions are appointed by the county executive and confirmed by the council, and along with that comes a serious responsibility of being a trustee. Under the Montgomery County Code, a trustee is required to act with the care, skill, prudence, and diligence under the circumstances that a prudent person acting in a similar capacity and familiar with the same matters would use to conduct a similar enterprise for similar purposes, and, most importantly, only in the best interest of the participants and their beneficiaries. The two boards combined together, especially the Health Benefit Trust, are comprised of 19 trustees. That is a very diverse and broad group of individuals that I've highlighted in my written testimony. What is unique about these boards is that they represent nearly every entity and function of the county government. Their unanimous opposition, both boards' unanimous opposition, is extraordinarily unprecedented given the broad base of individuals that serve on these boards as trustees. Additionally, the Maryland Court of Appeals has opined in some relevant case law that social investment policy that has a greater than de minimis impact on a pension fund's investment return may violate a trustee's duty of prudence and loyalty to the fund, which is a concern that we have had great discussion on at length as the trustee boards. It is for these reasons that the Montgomery County Career Firefighters Association opposes this legislation on the grounds that it is legally flawed, consistent with the county attorney opinion that was issued on November 19th, 2016. We believe that the legislation is operationally unworkable, that it is inconsistent with the required standard of care, and that the proposed legislation impermissibly interferes with the fiduciary duties and responsibilities required under applicable law of the trustees that serve on both boards. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Buttle. Mr. Liepensberger. Push that button at the base. At the base. There you go. There you go.
Can you hear me in the back?
We can hear you.
Thank you. I'm a master electrician, not a doctor. Okay. I'm a shop steward of local 1994 McGeo, speaking for myself in favor of the bill. My name's Kermit Liebensberger. My task is to inform or remind you that all 12 members of McGeo's executive board passed a unanimous resolution reflecting the strong feelings of most McGeo members. We have children and grandchildren who will inherit the planet we leave to them, for better or for worse. I've appended the McGeo resolution. It passed after over 100 stewards, officers, and staff gathered to hear what 97% of climate scientists have concluded. The 8,000 members of McGeo are a cross-section of county residents, office workers, school nurses, plumbers, and electricians like myself, corrections officers, bus drivers and mechanics, librarians and social workers. And like this county's residents, we are people with American ancestors going back a dozen generations and people who were born on the other side of the world. Many of us have college degrees. There's few of us without at least a high school diploma. Whatever our work, wherever we are from, our McGeo button reads, "Ask, I have an opinion." Here's where my opinion's coming from. My grandfather was a coal miner, a loyal member of the United Mine Workers. He walked picket lines and never crossed one. He was an intelligent man who helped his children pay for college so they wouldn't have to work in the mines. The question for coal miners and for everyone is this: will we burn our nation and the human race into extinction, or will miners and other fossil fuel workers worldwide get what they need to transition to other jobs without losing their homes, without losing their ability to help their children's education, without losing their health care? There's no money for this? No money for this? Don't ever forget the banks were bailed out with our tax money in the Great Recession. $475 billion for TARP. In the late 80s, the savings and loan scandal took $124 billion. Read today's Post. Here's another $125 billion. Are you thinking, well, what about natural gas, ethanol, and clean coal? Doesn't matter what's burned. Any Chem 101 student knows carbon dioxide is the product of combustion. Please learn the science, do the right thing. Don't let the advocates of oil choke your common sense off. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Fidler.
Good evening, President Berliner and members of the Council. I am Joan Fidler, President of the Montgomery County Taxpayers League, and I'm here to testify against Bill 4416. I would like to state at the outset that I'm fully aware of the effects of climate change. I worked for 21 years at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the last 11 as a member of the Senior Executive Service. I was head of the Office of Bilateral Affairs, where we worked with the rest of the world on climate-related issues. So while we are sympathetic to your passion for climate issues, we cannot support confounding that passion with fiduciary responsibilities. The $4 billion ERS and Retiree Health Benefits Fund are managed prudently and are faring very well. In fact, they fare better than similar funds at the state level and are run more efficiently. But this bill allows symbolism to determine investment decisions. We believe that more important than symbolism is the fiduciary responsibility to maximize earnings for the 20,000 current and 30,000 future beneficiaries whose financial security relies on these funds. The notion to divest from certain fossil fuel companies is a heartfelt impulse, but has little bearing on prudent investment principles. Purity of moral principle would dictate that we never invest in Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola and their sugar-laden drinks, or in Volkswagen that played fast and loose with emissions reporting, or in Wells Fargo that willfully cheated its customers. Where will it end? The standard of care requires the board to, quote, act only in the best interests of the participants and their beneficiaries, unquote, to which I would like to add the best interests of the taxpayers of the county who funded both the ERS and the Retiree Health Benefits Trust to the tune of $200 million just this year alone. Are we now going to let each new idea of social condemnation narrow the investment portfolio? Will you increase the taxpayer burden if divestment decisions result in lower returns? Though sympathetic to your impulse, the Taxpayers League cannot support this bill, which puts us on a slippery and dangerous slope that would allow investment decisions to be driven by political considerations. I don't need to remind you that Gardez bien is the motto of the county. Enough said. Thank you.
Enough said. Enough said from this excellent panel. We thank you very much for your testimony. No questions. Let me call up Group B. Start with Mr. Tidwell, Mr. Duty, Ms. Graham, Mr. Klein, Mr. Kidd, Mr. Dizinger. Mr. Tidwell, you're up. Hit that button. I know you can do this. There you go.
Hi, my name is Mike Tidwell. I live in Tacoma Park. I'm founder and director of the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, and I'm here in support of Bill 4416. I've lived in Montgomery County for 28 years, and I love this county. I love the libraries, I love the parks, I love the diverse and progressive population. My son attended our county's excellent public schools from K through 12. But here's what I don't love. In an era of rapid global warming, I don't love that part of my county tax dollars go directly to buying stock in mega-polluting companies like ExxonMobil, Arch Coal, and British Petroleum. Hats off to Council members Roger Berliner, Nancy Navarro, and Mark Elrich for introducing Bill 4416. Particular thanks to Council President Roger Berliner for making so many heavy lifts on the issue of climate change in your capacity on the county council over the years. It's really been recognized by me and our thousands of members across the county. Slippery slope. Let's take on that issue first. Unfortunately, some critics object to this bill as a slippery slope. You just heard it. They say it's perfectly okay to use our tax dollars to invest in companies who profit from global warming. They say, what's next? Divest from Coca-Cola since sodas contribute to diabetes? It's a silly question, of course. Global warming is an existential threat to our society, and ExxonMobil is not a soda company. The fossil fuel industry is knowingly pushing the world toward climate catastrophe for its own short-term profits. Let's take on the issue of fees, for transaction fees for selling these stocks. Critics claim that the small brokerage fees for selling dirty energy stocks would be a burden to our county. Really? Imagine telling your kids one day, we really wanted to stave off climate calamity, but the routine transaction costs of selling and reinvesting in greener companies were just too much to bear, so we just kept on investing in climate calamity. Who wants to tell their kids that one day? I am proud that Montgomery County already leads the nation in many programs to fight climate change. We invest heavily in energy efficiency measures and wind power for county buildings. But some critics claim that adopting the best and strongest fossil fuel divestment policy in America is just going too far. And nothing could be further from the truth. Here's an example. In 2004, under the leadership of Councilmember George Leventhal, our county made what was then the biggest wind power purchase east of the Mississippi River, biggest in U.S. history at the time. That That was 2004. It was the right thing to do, and it was touted by Councilmember Leventhal as an example for the rest of the country, and it worked. Now wind power is the fastest growing energy resource in America and around the world. And now it's time to divest our pension investment dollars. If apartheid still existed in South Africa, would we invest there? No. Would we knowingly invest in companies today that profit from child labor or human trafficking? Of course not. And now the act of investing directly in mountaintop removal for coal has grown similarly controversial. The act of profiting from fracking for oil and planet-warming gas has reached a special level of moral offense, and it's time to stop, period.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Duty.
President Berliner and council members, my name is Bob Duty. I am a member of the Board of Trustees of the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust. I am here to oppose Bill 44-16. I believe strongly in the need for climate action, but I also believe that this bill is badly misdirected. As you know, our trust is designed to provide health benefits for retirees of the county government, Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery College, and their dependents. If you add up all the current and retired employees of these three agencies, plus their dependents, the total is well over 100,000 people. The trust is still in the early stage of accumulating assets for retiree health benefits. We are making great progress, but we need to continue that progress. The chair of our Board of Trustees, Linda von Bargen, and the chair of the Board of Trustees for the county's pension fund, Gino Wren, has sent you a detailed memo explaining why both boards voted unanimously to oppose Bill 44-16. Let me briefly summarize some of those reasons. First, as the county attorney's office said on November 15th, the bill is legally flawed. Second, the bill is unworkable. The steps it requires to go through as we evaluate whether to divest from a fossil fuel company will excessively burden staff and carry no weight to incentivize target companies to cooperate. Third, the bill is inconsistent with our fiduciary duties as outlined in county code. This is a fatal flaw. The bill should be rejected for this reason alone. Fourth, the requirement of the bill regarding socially responsible investing is unnecessary, as the boards are already committed in their policies to this goal. Fifth, while it is nice to hear the claim that our investment return would not suffer and even could improve if we divest from fossil fuel companies, the fact is that no one really knows, and the opposite could easily happen. Warren Buffett is a brilliant investor and a progressive thinker. His Berkshire Hathaway portfolio includes some major positions in fossil fuel companies, and many of these companies are moving to renewables because they see the future. Sixth, the bill is symbolic. It would have no practical effect. The county needs to remain a national leader on real steps to address climate change. Feel-good gestures that confirm what we already know about greenhouse gas emissions really don't achieve anything. For these and other reasons, I and our entire board urge you to oppose Bill 44-16. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Graham.
My name is Christiane Graham. I'm the team leader of the Environmental Justice Ministry at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church in Bethesda, Maryland. With this testimony, I've also submitted a letter signed by several local church leaders in support of Bill 44-16. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. Climate change is accelerating. We are witnessing the increasing impacts of a consistently warming planet. In 2015-2016 alone, our country experienced record-breaking heat, droughts in California and Tennessee, causing extensive forest fires, and hurricanes which impacted millions of people. As Unitarian Universalists, we have pledged our support for the principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We have a responsibility to First Nation people and poor communities worldwide who suffer disproportionately from the effects of climate chaos. Further, we have pledged our support of the interdependent web of life and are bearing witness to the massive extinctions that are in motion now as a result of climate change. In his encyclical letter Laudato Si, Pope Francis warned of the dire consequences of climate change, noting that, quote, if present trends continue, this century may well witness extraordinary climate change and an unprecedented destruction of ecosystems with serious consequences for all of us. South African Bishop Desmond Tutu wrote, people of conscience need to break their ties with corporations financing the injustice of climate change. Serving as custodians of creation is not an empty title. It requires that we act with all the urgency this dire situation demands. We need an apartheid-style boycott to save the planet. As people of faith, we support Bill 4416, which divests the Montgomery County Retired Employee Pension Fund from fossil fuel holdings, and we urge responsible investments. And on a personal note, I want to introduce you to my grandniece Mila in Germany. When I arrive, she embraces me with her strong hug and smiles at me with delight. When she gets hurt, she climbs on my lap, and with soothing words, I assure her that her boo-boo will be better soon. She trusts me, despite my long absences. I live in the States now. I ask you, council members, how can I face Mila if I haven't asked you to support this divestment bill and have done everything in my power to stop her world from descending into climate chaos? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. Mr. Klein.
My name is Rob Klein. I'm president of the Montgomery County Retired Employees.
Mr. Klein, why don't you bring that mic right in front of you there? It makes it a lot easier to hear you.
Okay. My name is Rob Klein. I'm president of the Montgomery County Retired Employees Association, MCREA. We represent more than 6,000 retired employees, and the money that they invested in retirement funds. Our mission is to provide information to and advocacy for our members. The MCREA board acknowledges the seriousness of global warming. We praise the County Council for its leadership and actions to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels, such as the green building standards. We encourage your continued support for such countywide measures. However, Bill 4416 will not have the desired effect and will have real and potential negative impacts to both the retirement plan and the healthcare trust structure and funding. Divestment offers symbolic rather than genuine results. Thus, MCREA strongly opposes the bill and believes it is not amenable to technical corrections. Except for initial public offerings, corporate stocks do not affect corporate funding. Divestment will result in the transfer of ownership away from those who care about fossil fuels, thus diminishing among shareholders the voice for advocating for progressive environmental measures. The returns on the county's retirement funds are among the highest in the country. The bill threatens to decrease the quality of investment managers hired, increase fees, restrict investment options. Using the lowest impact estimates by Wilshire Consultants, divestment would result in an estimated $27 million of loss over a 10-year period. Under county code, the pension and health care funds carry fiduciary responsibilities to act only in the best interest of fund participants. The health care fund is currently funded at just 21%. These factors affect the county budget and affect the choices you have to make and may result in higher contributions from retirees. MCREA believes fossil fuels should be restricted to policy not violate fiduciary responsibilities and impact investment standards. It is important to note that fossil fuel providers have among the highest investment in alternative fuels. Thus, MCREA thanks the County Council for its consideration of our 6,000 members. We look forward to be part of the County Council meetings and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Mr. Kidd.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Kidd. I have lived in Montgomery County for 26 years. I'm a biological scientist and a concerned citizen fully supporting divestment. First, it's important to note that all of us contribute our tax dollars to help fund our county's pension funds, and therefore we all have the right to voice our concerns when we feel our money is being invested carelessly and immorally. I support divestment for many reasons, but will focus on the moral and the financial. First, the financial. The fossil fuel industry is no longer the solid blue chip sector worthy of diversifying into. It's now highly volatile, subject not only to the whims of OPEC, but also those of every other country in the world struggling with climate change. For example, China has recently made huge investments in electric charging stations to support the use of electric engines. Next, they could, in the blink of an eye, decide to slash the use of combustion engines, a disaster for fossil fuel companies. In addition, these companies appear to be greatly overvalued. Why? Because science tells us that if we are to stop runaway climate change, 80% of known fossil fuel reserves must stay in the ground. Yet Wall Street still evaluates fossil fuel companies using an outdated method based largely on the size of those reserves, simply assuming that they'll all be extracted and burned. But how valuable are these companies really, given that 80% of their reserves can't be burned? This is why many in the financial and scientific communities believe these companies are overvalued, putting us in a carbon bubble destined to burst. The cold, hard numbers tell us that Montgomery County has invested in companies whose reserves are 80% worthless. That's the math. I urge you and everyone in the audience to watch Bill McKibben's excellent documentary called Do the Math and see for the facts for themselves. It's free on YouTube. One last financial point. Just this year, Saudi Arabia announced that for the first time ever, they'll begin selling off some oil assets so they can invest that money elsewhere. Within 20 years, they hope to have a mostly oil-free economy. If even Saudi Arabia is pulling out, why are we still in? Finally, we should divest because our conscience tells us to. The World Health Organization predicts that by 2050, climate change will have taken millions of lives and caused widespread suffering. It will affect and is now affecting our own children. But it's well documented that fossil fuel companies have for decades covered up such dangers and doggedly spread misinformation as exposed in the documentary Merchants of Doubt. I will not remain silent while my tax dollars are invested in these deceitful companies that are ruining our children's climate. Is that what we want to teach our kids? That it's okay to sacrifice our fellow human beings and our beautiful natural world for a slim chance at making a buck? I urge the Council to consider both the moral and the financial folly of investing in fossil fuels, and please get us out of these investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Mr. Dissinger, hit that button, sir. There you go.
Good evening. I would like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak before you tonight about Council Bill 4416. My name is Robert Dysinger. I'm the president of the Montgomery County Police Alumni Association, Incorporated. Our association consists of nearly 800 former and retired members of the Montgomery County Police Department. Our retired members serve the citizens of Montgomery County as sworn police officers or civilian employees. The majority retired after many years of dedicated service. Others were retired on disability retirements that were awarded after they were injured in the line of duty, protecting the citizens of Montgomery County. However, all of us are dependent upon the employee retirement plans for payment of our retirement and the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust for continued support of our health benefit plans. My understanding of the employees' retirement system is that the Board of Investment Trustees and the Board of Trustees for the Consolidated Retiree Health Plans were established to specifically prevent anyone within the county government from changing or tampering with the funds held by them. The Board of Investment Trustees for both the plans have a fiduciary responsibility as established by the Montgomery County Code to act only in the best interest of the participants and their beneficiaries. Our greatest fear is that if this council uses this bill and can make changes in our plans for social or environmental issues, then what comes next? On November 18, 2016, the Board of Investment Trustees for the Employees Retirement System and the Board of Trustees for the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefits Trust each unanimously approved a resolution that opposes Bill 4416 as legally flawed, as outlined by the Office of the County Attorney. Operationally unworkable and inconsistent with the fiduciary duties specified in the county code. These duties require the board to act only in the best interests of participants and their beneficiaries. The Montgomery County Police Alumni Association would like to go on record that we do not support Bill 4416, and we strongly urge the County Council that it not be passed into law. Our retired members worked very hard to earn their pensions from a system that is very successful and it works. Please do not tamper with it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any questions from my colleagues. We appreciate your testimony this evening. Group C, Ms. Friedman, Mr. Whitney, Mr. Bader, Danielle Maitiv, sorry about that, David Locke, Ellen Post. Ms. Friedman, you're up.
Good evening. My name is Michael Friedman, and I'm here on behalf of the 5,000 Sierra Club members in Montgomery County. We welcome this opportunity to testify in support of Bill 4416. The dangers of global warming have been known for decades, but the threat is no longer something that is abstract somewhere in the distant horizon. We now witness at home and across the globe the devastation in lived time, the raging hurricanes, the record-breaking heat waves, the rising sea levels, and new public health threats appearing as rising temperatures move disease hosts from one region to the next. We know that increasingly harsh degradation of the planet is already baked in from the burning of fossil fuels over past decades. What will it take to make a difference in the current trajectory of catastrophe? Progress has been slow. Even here in Montgomery County, where people are unusually ecologically sensitive and where this council has enacted several far-reaching laws to facilitate our transition to a clean energy economy, change is not swift. The 2016 Office of Sustainability annual report stated that residential energy use in the past 4 years has grown by 26%, and the non-residential use has increased by 13% in the same period. So the key question is, how do we spur much faster change from institutions and industry that wish to move slowly, if at all? And one answer lies in highlighting the urgency of our goal through moral action. We need to underscore the urgency of becoming a clean energy economy by divesting from fossil fuel companies and refusing to bet our investment dollars on the continued destruction of the planet. Committing to reduce our investment in the largest greenhouse gas emitters is effectively a moral call to action to our institutions and companies that we must act in ways commensurate with the dangers. Montgomery County Sierra Club urges enactment of this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman. Mr. Whitney. Push that button right at your base. No, Ray, you're close, getting closer. You got it.
First time I've been here, thank you. My name is Steve Whitney. I live in
Welcome
Como
to
Park.
You, sir.
I've lived in Montgomery County since 1981. I strongly support the bill to divest. People have made extremely good arguments tonight for the moral grounds for this, and I would just say that in my own personal case, I am approaching retirement. I am looking very carefully at how I am going to get from here until the end of my life on certain grounds, and I personally feel that it would be complete folly to bet heavily on the fossil fuel industry, and I feel it's a morally repugnant choice. And I've talked to a number of investment advisors who all say there is a problem. It's not a slam dunk today. Nothing in the beginning is ever easy. And the reason those funds don't exist for the same low fees that other funds exist is simply because they haven't been demand. So how do we start demand? It's by somebody demanding it. And I have turned away several financial advisors because they couldn't come up with a solution. Now, I will tell you, I do not have a solution tonight. But I won't get a solution if I don't work for a solution. And I really hope that the county will take this very seriously and pursue it. And I believe that the definition of fiduciary duty means that it will be done in a responsible manner. It will not jeopardize the retirement of our retirees. In fact, my wife is a retired county teacher, and I feel like it's a fiduciary duty to look very, very seriously at this and to place some demands on the financial industry. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bader.
Good evening. I'm Walter Bader, and I'm past president of FOP Lodge 35, testifying on behalf of Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 35 and its active and retired members. I'm also a former trustee of the Montgomery County Board of Investment Trustees and a 40-year member of the Montgomery County Employees Retirement Plans. Trustees of the BIT and the Retiree Health Benefits Trust have a fiduciary duty to act only in the best interest of participants and beneficiaries and eligible dependents. Bill 4416, though creatively drafted, attempts to impair this duty by requiring the divestment of certain investments. Further, it would require trustees and staff to engage in research and actions unnecessary to the proper performance of their duties. Trustees and staff must be free to make prudent investments and to pay full time and attention to functions that are solely in the best interest of participants, beneficiaries, and eligible dependents. That provisions of this bill require specific indemnification of board trustees charged with complying with its mandates raises a red flag to us. Currently, the boards maintain investment and other policies and engage in practices fully consistent with trustees' fiduciary duties that may result in divestment of fossil fuel or non-fossil fuel investments if deemed prudent and advisable due to performance or other appropriate concerns. Nothing stops the board from making divestments if it's financially advisable. Similarly, the boards may consider socially responsible investing so long as the investments are deemed prudent and do not take on greater risk or reduce an expected rate of return consistent with the trustee's fiduciary duty. Indeed, it's our understanding that the board's policies do provide for environmental, social, and governance considerations. Employee retirement and health benefit funds are not endowments. An endowment may operate under different rules that could allow social investing or divestment. In contrast, our important funds were not created to become tools to promote political or social causes. There's an old Arabian proverb about the camel being permitted first to get his nose in the tent, followed thereafter by his entire body, ultimately leaving his host out in the cold. If passed, this bill will surely encourage others with social objectives to exert political pressure for future legislation not consistent with fidelity to participants. There's opposition to windmills, hydroelectricity, nuclear power, solar panels, sugary beverages, anti-union corporations, hotels and restaurants that don't pay a living wage. While pension and health benefits funds are real and critical to the health and welfare of employees and retirees, this bill is merely symbolic. There's a certain contradiction where the county is a consumer of the very fossil fuels being condemned by supporters of this legislation. Use of fossil fuels by the county is a necessity. Assuming that only 50% of the electricity used by Montgomery County is generated with fossil fuels, the county and its agencies use about $60 million worth of fossil fuels a year. That doesn't include gasoline for vehicles, emergency vehicles, and others, and buses. We ask that you vote against this legislation and support the trustees who are charged with the duty to act only in the best interest of participants and beneficiaries and eligible dependents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bader. Mr. Locke.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. I'm David Locke, The Council has twice appointed me as a public member of two important investment boards. One oversees the county government's employee retirement plans. The other oversees the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefit Trust for employees of county government, Montgomery County Public Schools, and Montgomery College. The combined assets exceed $4.5 billion. I'm here to speak in opposition to Bill 4416. This memo you have received, the memo you have received from the chairs of the two boards, Gina Wren and Linda Von Bargen, clearly state the factors that led both boards to vote unanimously to oppose the bill. Other speakers this evening have addressed the legal and fiduciary concerns. My comments are focused strictly on the investment-related issues. They are based on my long experience as an investment professional and fiduciary for retirement boards. First, by eliminating certain securities from consideration as Bill 4416 mandates, we would increase the likelihood that our portfolio's return on investment will decline. Breadth of opportunities is a fundamental law of investing. It states that the potential excess return is directly related to the number of investment opportunities. In other words, reducing the number of available investment opportunities will reduce the maximum potential excess return. Moreover, practitioners of the capital asset pricing model developed by William Sharpe, winner of the 1990 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, know that eliminating investment opportunities increases the potential risk of a portfolio. It mathematically cannot reduce the risk. Therefore, this bill would potentially reduce the excess return while increasing the potential risk. Second, in making investment decisions, environmental, social, and governance factors should not be arbitrarily imposed by eliminating certain kinds of investments altogether, as this bill would do. Instead, ESG factors should be proactively incorporated as a material consideration in the investment process. This is precisely what the boards do today. This is the correct approach. Third, it's useful to assess this bill in the context of the Chartered Financial Analyst designation. The CFA, as I heard one of the other speakers mention, is a highly regarded certification program for investment professionals and a requirement at many investment management firms. Some elements of Bill 4416 are in direct conflict with the Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct required of all charter holders and candidates. A number of my colleagues on the boards and on our staff hold the CFA designation. I myself am a Level 2 candidate. We are acutely sensitive to the conflict between the fiduciary duties that are inherent in the CFA designation on the one hand and the requirements of this bill on the other. These investment-related issues provide further reasons to reject Bill 4416. The boards would appreciate your consideration of our unanimous opposition to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Post.
My name is Ellen Post, and I live in Silver Spring. Before I retired, I was an environmental economist working in the Environment and Resources Division of Apt Associates. I worked primarily on air pollution risk assessment and benefits analysis for our main client, the EPA. I first became concerned about climate change when James Hansen testified about it before Congress in 1988. That was 28 years ago. For 28 years, economists have been saying that Congress should put a price on carbon in the form of either a carbon tax or a cap-and-trade program. Putting a price on carbon at the national level is far and away the most efficient way to reduce emissions. It would do this by changing incentives, thereby harnessing the power of the market to direct emissions reduction efforts. But for 28 years, our Congress has done nothing. After the recent election, we will have a government in which all three branches are under the control of a political party that has made climate change denial a badge of party identity. There is no question that this is due in part to the outsized influence of the fossil fuel industry. It has never been clearer that we need to reduce the influence of this industry on our Congress. I've heard the argument that there are many, quote, bad actors, and Montgomery County cannot divest from all of them. But the fossil fuel industry is not just a bad actor. It is in a class by itself. It is an industry that is knowingly threatening the viability of human civilization on this earth for its own short-term profit. Climate change is an existential threat with the potential to destroy whole cities and threaten the lives of millions and eventually billions of people around the world. There is no question that a problem of the enormity of climate change requires action at the federal level and, of course, ultimately at the global level as well. I know that Montgomery County has done a number of things to address its own greenhouse gas emissions, and I applaud those efforts. But these actions will not accomplish what is really needed if we are to have any chance of avoiding catastrophic climate change. And that is action at the federal level. Divestment is a tool to help accomplish that. When enough respected institutions and local governments take a principled stand by divesting from a rogue industry that threatens the planet, it will stigmatize that industry and make it increasingly uncomfortable for our congressmen to do its bidding. Only then will we get the kind of action at the federal level that has been desperately needed for decades. Many other organizations and institutions have found a way to safely divest from the fossil fuel industry. I am confident that the Montgomery County government can too. It's the right thing to do. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Post. I see no questions, but Mr. Bader, just a point of information. Mr. Bader, our county only procures clean energy for its own use. It buys gasoline and things of that nature. But in terms of our energy consumption, be aware that we are a 100% clean energy. So when you do your calculation next, take that into account. Thank you very much. Group D, Mr. Georgina, Mr. Sullivan, Christine Penzick, Ann Manuel, David Goodrich, Mary Andrews. Mr. Georgina.
Good evening, President Berliner, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I'm here to plead to you not to let ideological beliefs take priority over your fiduciary responsibilities. You have a responsibility, as you've heard already, to the police, the firefighters, and the teachers of Montgomery County who are relying on the retirement funds for their retirement benefits. In my personal opinion, you are already overpromising benefits and underfunding the money necessary to meet those priorities. Direction to the fund managers to divest from a certain sector of the stock market, with the costs involved in that divestiture, could be the final nail in the coffin to those promises. I manage my own retirement system, and every advisor that I've talked to advises one specific thing: don't let your emotions gear how you invest. The only consideration you should make is what are the return on the investments. According to a November 24, 2016 article in the Washington Times, the Stanford University, New York University, and many other high-profile schools have said no to divestment of fossil fuel holdings. 70% of the votes in the last election were for term limits. That means a lot of Democrats and independents voted for it. I think the major reason is because of bills like this. There are some who believe that this may be a reprisal for those votes. I'm hopeful that this is not the case, and that it is only a misguided effort to advance an agenda without consideration of the unintended consequences. Please help to dispel that former concern and avoid leaving a legacy, a bankrupt retirement fund, by sending this bill to the recycle bin. And by the way, the best option would be to keep the stock and show up at the stockholders' meetings and express your concerns. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sullivan.
My name is Rick Sullivan. I am 68 years old and I live in Kensington, Maryland. In 2011, I retired from Montgomery County government after 21 years of service in the Department of Health and Human Services. During my employment with the county, I was a shop steward with UFCW Local 1994 McGeo. Since retiring, I have become active with 350 Montgomery County, and I serve on the board of the Montgomery County Retired Employees Association. I am also the father of a 27-year-old daughter who enjoyed the benefits of a Montgomery County public schools education. I have been studying climate change for over a dozen years. I am convinced that climate change is very real and is caused by human activity. In my opinion, climate change is the greatest threat that humanity currently faces and is arguably the greatest threat that we have ever faced. I am convinced that we must make radical changes in the way we collectively live our lives in order to avoid climate catastrophe. The most obvious and urgent change that needs to be made is the termination of our use of fossil fuels at the earliest possible date. I am personally committed to doing everything I can do to make this happen. It has been said that those of us living on this earth at the current time are the first people to experience the effects of human-caused climate change, and that we are the last people who have an opportunity to prevent full-blown climate catastrophe. I take this responsibility very personally and very seriously. My daughter, the children she may have, and unborn generations to come are depending on us to take action to protect our precious and irreplaceable human habitat. As a pensioner with the Montgomery County Employees Retirement System and as a county taxpayer, I object to my income and my tax dollars being connected to fossil fuel investments. These investments are scientifically unsound, financially reckless, and morally reprehensible. Finally, I would like to thank Councilmember Berliner, Councilmember Elrich, and Councilmember Navarro for showing the leadership and courage to sponsor Bill 4416. I hope that the rest of the Council joins you in passing this vital legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Pinsick.
Good evening. My name is Christine Pensic. I live here in Montgomery County for the last 23 years. I'm the Senior Climate Change Advisor for the Bureau for Latin America at the U.S. Agency for International Development. I just spent a year, in fact, in Brazil for my job working on strategies to help conserve the Amazon. But I'm first and foremost a longtime resident of this county, very happy to be back here, and committed to keeping it the great place it is for many different people to live in. On one of my recent trips to the Amazon, I had to do something I frankly hoped I'd never do. I walked on the bed of the Negro River, which is one of the two main tributaries of the Amazon River itself. Due to severe extended droughts, the Negro River dried up a few years ago. I walked on the grass that had grown up on the riverbed. This is a major impact on a river system that holds 20% of the world's fresh water and which in turn irrigates an immense rainforest whose ability to capture and generate moisture affects the major farm areas of the U.S., including the Midwest and California. Very distant effects are going to affect us. The drying of the river was part of the El Nino cycle, but it was intensified by climate change. so I have seen and felt under my own feet how climate change is altering major global systems and how from a distance it is going to reach out to us. We must have a response to climate change that is at the scale of the global alterations happening around us. Strong research and development have brought down the costs of solar and wind power. Higher national fuel standards have brought more fuel-efficient cars to market at last. Those changes are excellent and will have an enduring effect. We also, however, must have a federal, national level political strategy. According to George Mason University's Center on Climate Change Communications, as of March of this year, 70% of Americans agree that global warming is happening and is a problem. An equal number, 71%, want corporations and industry to do more to address climate change. But only 37% think the American people can probably convince the U.S. Congress to pass legislation needed to reduce global warming. Why? Because Congress depends too much on oil and gas companies' campaign contributions and won't vote for the economy-wide actions we need to address this threat at the scale that's needed. We must break the hold of oil, coal, and gas companies over Congress if we're going to ensure our future. I believe that divestment is a critical part of the political strategy to achieve that end and that it can be executed without harm to the county retirees. I urge the Council to pass Bill 4416. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Manuel.
Good evening. My name is Ann Manuel. I'm a teacher at Montgomery Blair High School, and I've lived in Montgomery County for more than 30 years. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to express my views in support of Bill 4416. 2014 was the hottest year on record until 2015, and 2016 looks like it's going to end up being hotter still. I harvested tomatoes from my garden in November, and I have black-eyed Susans blooming tonight in my yard. We've never in our lives used as much air conditioning as this year, but these concerns are absolutely petty compared to those of people living in areas more vulnerable to climate change. Andean glacier retreat, massive heat waves, Alaskan coastline villages populated by natives for thousands of years that are now threatened. And all of these climate disasters have profound political and economic consequences that affect all of us. To cite just one horrifying example, Syria's civil war was preceded by a prolonged drought. This year's ugly backlash against immigration may seem mild in retrospect as climate refugees pour desperately across borders in the years to come. We have a responsibility to every human living on this planet to curb emissions that propel climate change. Fossil fuel divestment uses a proven tool to reduce the political power of the corporations that have blocked meaningful policies to address carbon emissions. Nobel Peace Prize winner Desmond Tutu of South Africa has called for a worldwide fossil fuel divestment campaign modeled on the campaign that helped bring an end to apartheid in his country. People of conscience need to break their ties with corporations financing the injustice of climate change, Tutu wrote. As a history teacher, I see how tides can shift suddenly. Things that seemed unthinkable, like, say, for example, the abolition of slavery in 1859, become inevitable a few years later. The only question is whether we'll reach a consensus on the need to do everything possible to stop man-made climate change before we reach a tipping point of irreversible environmental destruction.
Thank you. Mr. Goodrich.
My name is David Goodrich. I live in Rockville. I'm a retired climate scientist and former director of the United Nations Global Climate Observing System in Geneva, Switzerland, and of climate observations at NOAA in Silver Spring. On my retirement, I rode my bicycle from here to Oregon, observing climate change on the ground. So climate issue is personal for me. From the bike, I saw Barrier Island in Delaware that had been repeatedly breached by the ocean. In the Rockies, vast swaths of pine forests are dead now because winters are no longer cold enough to kill off the beetles that attack them. Glaciers are disappearing from Glacier National Park at a rate far faster than predicted. Climate change is here now. Recent presentations by the executive director of the Board of Investment Trustees depict a projection to 2040 in which 57% of North American energy production remains as fossil fuels. From a climate perspective, this represents a minimal reduction in carbon dioxide emissions. The science community has done substantial research into just what such a high emission scenario implies for the U.S. by 2100. For sea level rise, the difference between a fossil fuel future and one of constrained emissions is basically that of 4 feet versus 1 foot of sea level rise, and would mean the loss of large portions of major U.S. cities, including Washington. At 5 feet of sea level rise, the National Mall is flooded. For Washington, the number of days over 95 degrees will grow from an average of 4 over the last 20 years to 74 by 2100. More and more of our rain is coming down in heavy downpours, an impact of climate change. The flash flood that devastated Ellicott City last summer was, according to the historical record, a 1 in a 1,000-year event. But such downpours are becoming increasingly frequent, and history is no longer a reliable guide. This is a future that doesn't have to happen. But if we follow the guidance of the Board of Investment Trustees, this is not only a future that will happen, but for the sake of its investments, Montgomery County needs to have a piece of it. In 1838, Georgetown University sold 272 slaves to forestall a budget crisis. While today we see this decision as an abomination, in the financial context of the time it was perfectly reasonable. Their arguments would be familiar today. Politics should not enter into investment decisions. No one can argue a moral equivalence between the horror that was slavery and climate change. Yet when our grandchildren look out on where Miami Beach or Ocean City used to be, how will they look at our legacy? It is often a preamble to statements from opponents of the bill that they are committed environmentalists and favor the bill in principle. When does principle turn to action? Scientists have known about climate change for 30 years. If now is too soon, when will the time be right? If preserving the planet isn't our job, whose job is it? After last month, we surely can't depend on the federal government. It's up to us now. Thanks very much for your time.
Ms. Andrews.
Good evening. I'm Mary Andrews, wife of the late Peter Murtha, one of the co-founders of 350 Montgomery County. Some of you took the time to meet with him and hear his cogent and impassioned arguments on divestment. I thank you for listening. To those of you who gave him reason to hope that this day would come, I am grateful. I'm not here tonight on behalf of Peter. I'm here on behalf of myself and my daughters who are Montgomery County voters, but who could not be here tonight. I'm not here as an expert in economics or divestment, but as someone who has devoted my life to public service and environmental protection. I know that several, if not all, of you agree with me that global climate change threatens the world as we know it, that it is the defining issue of our generation. I am confident that you do not want your children and grandchildren to inherit a world of increasingly cataclysmic storms, flooding, drought, fires, and extinction of the type we are already beginning to see. And yes, those of us who are fortunate enough to live in the wealthiest countries with the best pieces of real estate may be able to pretend that this is not going to disrupt our lives. But for most of the world's people, there is no higher ground, no more suitable arable land to move to. So the only question before us is, or should be, whether divesting our county's pension funds is a reasonable and appropriate response to this threat. As a Montgomery County homeowner for the last 23 years, I have not had occasion to appear before the City Council before. But when I learned that our tax revenues are heavily invested in fossil fuels, I was personally offended. I was personally offended that the money I pay to support our retired public servants is invested in the very companies that work to hide the truth of this threat, that blithely accelerate the destruction of our only home for their short-term gain. I cannot condone those investments for myself personally, and I call on you to condemn those investments as well. I expect our elected representatives to walk their talk. I expect you to see the moral imperative in front of you. In short, I expect you, elected in one of the most progressive counties in this country, to lead the way on this issue. Please choose to take a stand and make history here in Maryland.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews, and thank you on behalf of all of us for your husband's legacy, which we hope to carry out in this chamber. We do not normally engage in a lot of Q&A in these conversations, but there's been a theme that has been repeated throughout this debate tonight that is the lead sponsor of this legislation, along with Ms. Navarro. I wanted to make sure that people have read the bill, and I want to read a particular portion of the bill because much of the conversation this evening from those opposing the legislation have said that this legislation is inconsistent with the fiduciary duties. So I want you to hear the following language in the bill for the record, because it's been 3 panels now and this has been a consistent theme, and then we'll just let it go because we can have the debate when we get to the work sessions and the other amendments that we'll be considering at that time. Nothing in this section must require a board to take action as described in this section unless the board determines in good faith that the action described in this section is consistent with the fiduciary responsibilities of the board. We put this forth because we felt we could achieve both. That is, you could honor the fiduciary duty and do what ought to be done. So I just want to make sure that everybody appreciates that that is what the bill says. So thank you to this panel. Let's go to Group E. Gina Angiola, Bailey Condry, Palmer Legary, Susan Jacobson, Michael DeLong, Sabine Dorn. How'd I do? Great. Gina.
Good evening. My name is Gina Angiola. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify in support of this very important bill. As a Montgomery County resident, a retired physician, and a mother terrified for the future all of our children will face on the planet, I've spent the last 14 years as a citizen advocate working on health and environmental issues. It's time to speak the truth about the fossil fuel industry. Yes, fossil fuels have allowed us to live more comfortable and more mobile lives, but at a cost few of us have truly understood. From extraction to end use, fossil fuels have been making large numbers of people ill for years, including the industry's own workers. Now this fossil fuel addiction threatens the very life support systems of the planet, including our climate. More than 200,000 people in the U.S. die prematurely each year due to particulates and ozone from combustion emissions. These pollutants are also linked to premature births, autism, chronic respiratory diseases, heart attacks, and other illnesses. Beyond combustion emissions, there are also many other ways that this industry pollutes air and water. The fossil fuel industry has literally been killing us for decades with no real accountability. But the harms we've experienced from pollution are a drop in the bucket compared to the health impacts coming our way from climate disruption. It's already begun. Heat strokes, worsening allergies and asthma from increases in pollen levels, changes in life cycles and distribution of disease-carrying vectors like mosquitoes, torrential rains causing thousand-year floods that kill people, sewage overflows contaminating water supplies and spreading disease, dying corals and crop damage on land, creating food insecurity on vast scales, wildfires and hurricanes of increasing intensity causing traumatic injuries and community destruction. Millions will be migrating from coastal regions due to sea level rise, threatening the very stability of nations. This is unlike any challenge we face. Climate change is a public health emergency, threatening the mass extinction of all species, including us. And Exxon and its collaborators knew all this was coming decades ago. Why on earth would we continue to invest in companies that are committed to killing us and destroying our only home? I made a personal decision almost a decade ago not to invest in fossil fuel companies, knowing full well back then that I might be foregoing significant investment returns. I didn't want to build my personal wealth on the companies that were making people sick, damaging communities, and destroying ecosystems. Think Exxon Valdez, Deepwater Horizon, and now fracking everywhere. It bothers me deeply that my tax dollars are being invested in these companies right here in my own county. I support this bill for two reasons. First, we have a moral obligation, as many others have explained, to divest our pension funds from fossil fuels. Second, divestment is a key tool in our toolbox to force real change in our energy options, and we need every tool we can find given the recent election. Retirees may not have a livable planet to retire to if we don't get serious about climate change. Let's get this passed and look for ways to do more. Thank you.
Mr. Condrey.
Good evening, members of council. I thank you for your service. My name is Bailey Condrey. I'm from Kensington. I support Bill 4416 because I need your help. My boyhood home on the edge of the Chesapeake Bay is being taken by the sea. The same plight faces hundreds of communities throughout Maryland's Bay watershed and its Atlantic coast. Inundation and economic collapse. Collapse begins slowly when land values decline due to saltwater incursion. 13 island communities in the Bay have already been wiped off the map. What are you going to do to protect the citizens of Maryland who live on its coast from sea level rise? We all have choices to make. 25 years ago, scientists for the fossil fuel industry discovered that carbon emissions posed an existential threat to humanity. The data clashed with their business model. They chose to bury it. Then they chose to lie to the American people. They chose to corrupt politicians at all levels of government by spreading cash far and wide. Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma is a great example. Having taken more than $1.5 million from the fossil fuel industry, he blocks all meaningful climate legislation. And his state is now being torn apart by earthquakes caused by fracking wastewater injection wells. The FFI chose to create front groups called the Heartland Institute, the American Legislative Exchange Council, Americans for Prosperity. Meanwhile, real scientists chose to dig deeper. They learned more and they published in peer-reviewed journals. They learn from one another and they collaborate. Thanks to them, we now know that physical feedback loops accelerate climate change while the fossil fuel industry continues to advertise how great they are. Real scientists choose to build a body of irrefutable science. Real scientists choose to share this knowledge with the American people. All the while, they've been harassed by fossil fuel front groups, corrupt political lackeys, and conservative radio bloviators. Once you know something, you cannot unknow it. So the fossil fuel industry has spent billions of dollars with premeditation to lie to us. You, as leaders, have a choice to make, and we hope that you support Bill 4416. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ligari.
My name is Palmer Laguerre, and I support Bill 4416. You're close enough. I've been called worse, believe me. I live
so have I promise.
I live in Gaithersburg, and I'm working as a nursing assistant. I'm also a student at Montgomery Community College, working towards my registered nurse. Like most students at Montgomery Community College, I'm working and studying at the same time. It requires a great deal of sacrifice and discipline, but MC students are willing to make these sacrifices because we believe in a brighter future, not only for ourselves, but more importantly, for our children and for our communities. Because of this desire for a better future, we are greatly disturbed at the fact that this council is investing funds in fossil fuel companies that are diligently working toward a dangerous and terrifying future. As students, we are told to look at the evidence and objectively come to conclusions. In the case of climate change, the conclusions are crystal clear. Fossil fuels are already having a significantly harmful effect on the planet and will have a devastating impact in the years to come if we do not take action now. Fossil fuel companies like Exxon have known this for decades, yet they chose to hide this information from the public. Today, they invest enormous amounts of money in advertising campaigns and political contributions with the goal of amassing even greater wealth despite the horrific outcomes. Students at Montgomery Community College are not fooled. We are organizing against climate change deniers while at the same time working to feed our families and studying to build a better future. Please do not destroy our chances at a better future. Divest in fossil fuel companies now. Hundreds of MC students have joined the campaign for divestment, and in doing outreach on campus, we have found that the vast majority of students stand with us. I'm happy to be working in the healthcare field and improving the quality of life of county residents in need of care. As a nursing assistant, we are already overworked. Climate change is causing widespread illness and death now, and if we don't change course, it will devastate our healthcare system. We have a nursing shortage and major challenges in providing quality, affordable healthcare today. What will this look like when millions of people are driven from their homes, billions of dollars in infrastructure is destroyed, and increasingly destructive hurricanes and storms batter our country? As a nursing assistant, I primarily serve elderly people who have worked hard all their lives but are no longer able to be independent. I do so because I believe it is extremely important these people not be abandoned. If you choose to continue to invest in fossil fuel companies, you will be abandoning the students and children in this country. In this county. I respect each and every council member, but ask you to look at the facts. I've heard many people come up here and say that you can't use this to get involved in political issues. We as students, our children, and our planet are not political issues. Please divest now.
Ms. Jacobson.
My name is Sue Jacobson. I live in Rockville. I am a Montgomery County retiree. I started working in Montgomery County as a children's librarian in the Montgomery County Public Libraries in 1977 and now receive my pension from the county. I care very deeply about how our county responds to climate change. I want my pension to be invested ethically. I was thrilled to learn about the introduction of the fossil fuel divestment bill. Thank you, Council members Berliner, Navarro, and Eldridge. The Trump election means that local action to help mitigate climate change is more important than ever. Trump plans to undo as many environmental regulations as possible, allowing fossil fuel companies to unleash more pollutants than they have for many years. His comments and appointments so far show that oil and gas company executives, not scientists, are going to be his primary advisors on climate. How can we have good climate policy when the companies that help create the problem are telling him what we should do? The world is looking for signs that the U.S. will continue to show leadership on this issue, and we, Montgomery County, can and should do the right thing with divestment from the fossil fuel industry. We will not be the only place to do this, but we should take a lead on this issue. Much of the funding of our pensions comes from our taxes and some from money deducted from our paychecks. I know that I don't want my tax dollars and or my pension invested in the oil, coal, and natural gas industries. I don't support what those companies are doing to the climate, and I don't want the county to support them with their investments. I don't support them with my personal investments. I think the divestment bill is a great idea, and I hope you will all come together and pass it as soon as possible. We don't have any time to waste, as we are already seeing dangerous signs of climate change all over the world. Increase in storms and flooding in some places, and extreme drought in others, as well as enhanced warming in the Arctic at a level that has not been seen before. These companies also endanger the quality of our air and our water, which are the two things human beings cannot live without. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeLong.
Good evening. My name is Michael DeLong. I'm a resident of Silver Spring and a proud member of the Montgomery County Young Democrats, and I'm here to testify on their behalf in favor of County Bill 4416. I first became involved in this issue about a year ago. I was growing increasingly concerned about climate change and frustrated with the lack of action in many areas, and convinced that greater efforts were needed to reduce it. Several years ago, I visited Banff National Park in Canada, and the tour guides there showed us how the glaciers all over the park have been shrinking over the last generation. That's largely due to climate change. It's one of the greatest problems that confronts our county, our country, and the entire world, and it is especially harmful for my generation, millennials, because we're going to have to deal with the consequences. Burning fossil fuels is one of the biggest contributors to climate change, but the fossil fuel industry's plan is to keep exploiting these fuels, even though the known reserves far exceed what we can burn if we are to reduce and ultimately halt climate change. It is unconscionable to invest in companies that are undermining our future. Currently, we have substantial investments in Chevron, BP, ExxonMobil, and other companies. And Montgomery County taxpayers are involved in this. I don't want my tax dollars or the pensions going to that. Divestment will send a strong political message that this is unacceptable and that we need to move away from fossil fuels and toward renewable energy. It will also not harm the pension fund. Divestment doesn't harm financial performance, and portfolios without investments in fossil fuels can actually perform better. And moreover, hundreds of colleges, local governments, investment funds, religious organizations, and other groups have committed to divestment, and Montgomery County should step up to the plate and join this fight. We thank Council Members Berliner, Navarro, and Elrich for their great work, and we hope that the rest of you will vote in favor of divestment and work to secure its passage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Dorn.
My name is Sabine Dorn. I have been living in Montgomery County since 1983 and have felt that this county is often willing to take courageous steps for the environment, the latest example being the adoption of a bill to ban pesticides from communal lawns. Climate change is considered by the WHO as the greatest threat for children. As a representative of the baby boomer generation, it saddens and shames me that my son and his fiancée belong to the first generation that is struggling with the decision whether or not it is conscionable to have children in the face of such overwhelming uncertainty of the future. Only very courageous and decisive action can absolve our generation from the moral guilt to leave such a dismal legacy for the next generation. The water protectors at Standing Rock just exemplified such a principled and determined stance, giving special meaning to the Native American saying that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, but we are borrowing it from our children. In this spirit, I also encourage the Generation Xers and the millennials among us to be active and to hold us, their elders, accountable. Unprecedented ecological collapse is happening every day under our watch. Unfortunately, new exploration of fossil fuels is still imposed on us in many parts of the country. Ironically, most of it not even for home use, but for export, where the benefits are reaped by fossil fuel companies and the devastating effects and true costs of the exploration are suffered and borne by the communities. We here in Montgomery County could take a courageous step forward to change this trend by adopting Bill 4416. This step seems to be the low-hanging fruit anyway, considering the prediction of financial experts that those stocks should be considered stranded assets in our portfolio due to the rising cost of extraction. One of the companies we are invested in happens to be Exxon, a company now investigated by New York and Massachusetts for hiding findings from their own climate study in the late 70s, which confirmed that climate change is man-made and that without drastic reductions in greenhouse gases, we are facing the end of life as we know it. Instead of leading the effort to steer us clear from catastrophe, Exxon mounted a vicious campaign to mislead the public by casting doubt about climate change and financing attacks against the worldwide consensus of climate scientists. Their reckless behavior set us back several decades, lost to decisive action on alternative energy. We have great examples of positive actions, however, and in D.C. uses more solar power than the whole sun-drenched state of Arizona. And in June of this year, D.C. divested their $64 billion pension fund from direct investment in 200 of the most powerful polluting fossil fuel companies. So did 500 other cities, faith groups, universities, and other organizations. We can and must do it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. I was starting to get nervous about that trap door for you.
Sorry?
I was starting to get nervous about that trap door for you there. Thank you very much for your testimony, all of you. Our last panel. Ms. Lee, Mr. Palmer, Mr. Bruno, Mr. Williard, Ms. Hill. Miss Lee, you're up first. You see that button there? No, not quite. There you go.
Good evening. My name is Liz Lee, and I live in Rockville, Maryland. I'm here testifying in support of Bill 4416. As a minority, I work actively with nonprofits, advocating and ensuring that the views and values of all people are represented. I'm here today as one of many Asian Americans in Montgomery County that care deeply about environmental issues. My immigrant parents found their first jobs in Montgomery County after graduate school close to 40 years ago. My sister and I both attended Montgomery County public schools, and I practice as an attorney close to 10 years in the county. And right now I'm very excited that my family's next generation, including my 8-year-old niece, currently live in such a progressive county and in a sustainable, green-friendly city like Rockville. I'm proud to be a longtime resident, and today I ask the leadership continue to support and champion green initiatives, especially those that make sense for Montgomery County residents, their health, finances, and the environment. Investing in the fossil fuel industry has negative short and long-term impacts. First, the fossil fuel industry has not been conducting business in the best interest of local residents or this planet. I applaud the council members who have taken a strong position in support of a statewide ban on fracking. As you know, we need not look far to Pennsylvania, Ohio, or even to recent peer-reviewed scientific data to see how the fracking industry adversely impacts our health, increases the likelihood of earthquakes, lowers our home values, and increases global warming effects. The risk to our health is high, given that the pollution to air, water, and land cannot be geographically confined. In supporting the fracking ban, you demonstrated that we clearly do not want fracking companies with their unhealthy and unethical actions to be conducting business anywhere in Maryland. Thus, it follows that we should also not be investing in these companies either. Divestment will align our financial power with our stated values as a county on the fracking industry. Likewise, negative actions by the oil or coal industry parallel present actions to the more recent fracking industry. Adverse effects brought on by companies like Exxon or BP should not be ignored simply because they've been around for years. Moreover, our reliance on fossil fuels impedes long-term strategies in advancing renewable energy sources. Investing in these companies for possible profit while sacrificing our health, finance, and the environment is a short-term and short-sighted strategy. Lastly, divestment allows for a welcomed opportunity to invest in better performing funds, which not only fulfills our fiduciary duty, but it also does not stray from the county's values on the environment. In the end, divestment is in our best interest, and I urge the council to support Bill 4416. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Mr. Palmer. Push that button. No, Mr. Palmer, let's try it again. There you go.
My name is Scott Palmer, and I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm a retired naval officer, and I'm retired from the aerospace industry, too. And all this retirement has led to a lot of work for me. Today, we are listening to many people voice their opinions on the divestment of fossil fuels, and I want to focus on just two aspects of it, the economics and the morality. You have a responsibility to make sure that good investments are made for the community's retirement funds. Fossil fuel stocks make up about 10% of the U.S.'s portfolio. In the coal portion of the industry, there have already been severe declines, and it's not any rocket science to figure that out. But also, the oil decline isn't likely to return soon. The natural gas is being lauded by some people as the bridge fuel to help us get there. However, science tells us we have to do things much quicker. And believe me, natural gas is not a clean fuel. So this is for the people that have talked about fiduciary responsibilities that they have and testified here. The end result of continuing to use fossil fuel companies in the county's portfolio will result in a gradual decline. And the price point for renewable energy is already at parity in many places throughout the United States. It means it's the same as going with fossil fuels anyway. So another factor that you have to consider is that people are realizing that the fossil fuel industries are not paying for all the externalities that occur, and we're going to bear the brunt of all of that ourselves. The public is becoming acutely aware of all the harm that's happening. That's those externalities. And they're watching to see what we do about it. There are very large economic pulses for switching to clean energy. First, it's going to create millions of jobs. Second, over time, it's going to lessen floods, droughts, storms, extinctions, hostilities over food and water, massive migration, severe health issues. Do these sound like soda pop issues? They're not. It's a different class. From a moral point of view, there are some simple questions you need to ask yourself before you vote. How will divestment make a difference? Should we keep some investments to provide shareholder influence in the industry? And what will we tell our grandchildren when they wake up in a world that's in shambles? The
Mr.
first
Palmer,
thing is...
I apologize. I think your time is up.
Let me make a closing sentence then.
If you would, please.
Finally, the answer to, we must answer to our children and grandchildren because your decision goes far into the future. Do you want to tell them that you got a 2% higher dividend for the county, or that you took action to protect them from runaway climate change? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bruno.
Mr. Berliner, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. My name is William Bruno, and I'm a resident of Bethesda. But I'd particularly like to speak to members of the council who may have some concerns about this legislation. I have worked as a financial advisor for approximately 13 years, And in the last 5 years, my area of particular interest has been helping families with sustainable and low-carbon investing. For my personal investments, I myself use this strategy. Finally, I serve pro bono on the Committee on Sustainable and Responsible Investing of the Episcopal Diocese of the Washington area. The views I am presenting tonight, though, are purely my own. I think what a lot of people are concerned about with this legislation is what impact it will have on the performance of the pension fund. These conversations among financial professionals often begin with what the performance implications are going to be, and they often focus on backward-looking studies of past performance. Such an approach often can be a useful starting point for predicting what will happen with performance in the future. But many experts see the future energy investment landscape as significantly different from what has existed in the past, and see fossil fuel investing as involving much more risk than many individuals appreciate. For example, Bank of England Governor Mark Carney stated that the carbon risk faced by investors was, quote, potentially huge, unquote. As an FYI, the Board of Governors in England is similar to the U.S. Federal Reserve. So these are not individuals who are inclined to make such statements lightly. While some analysts do see less danger from climate risk than Mr. Carney, we in the U.S. are behind many in the broader global investment community in recognizing the long-term risks of climate change. It is, of course, impossible to predict the future. No one knows how any investment strategy will perform in the next month, not to mention the next 15 years. But if Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, is right, over the long term, divestment may reduce the risk in a portfolio. So why is there such great interest among organizations and individuals in divestment? An important reason is that the sale of fossil fuel companies in a portfolio can be part of an effective strategy to combat climate change. The key United Nations leader on climate change summed it up this way, and I quote, "Where capital goes over the next 15 years is going to decide whether we're actually able to address climate change and what kind of century we're going to have."
Mr. Bruno.
My last sentence will be, increased investments may be key drivers of the shift toward a low-carbon economy, and I hope you will be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Willard.
Thank you. My name is Tim Willard. I am representing the Montgomery County Green Party, and I've come to speak in favor of Bill 4416 as a first step toward dealing with our environmental crisis. We live in a beautiful world, but we are putting it in serious danger. In 2015, CO2 levels rose at the fastest pace since observations began. This summer, a killer heat wave in the Middle East set historic records and pushed the heat index to the limits of what humans can survive. In parts of California's Sierra Nevada range, 80% of the trees are dead because of warming and drought. The Aral Sea, once the fourth largest body of fresh water in the world, has lost 90% of its volume due to overuse. Major lakes in Africa and South America have also disappeared. We are losing about 1% of our topsoil every year. Most of this is caused by industrial agriculture. Our planet is now in the midst of its sixth great extinction. 1/3 or more of all species of amphibians are now at risk of extinction, as are 1/5 of reptiles, 12% of bird species, and 21% of fish species. About 90% of primates are severely endangered. But it doesn't have to go on like this. We can mobilize our economy like we did in World War II to convert to a 100% renewable energy economy. We can move to 100% recycling. We can pass a mandatory green building code for efficient buildings with renewable energy standards. We can replace industrial farming that overuses pesticides and fertilizers with organic farming that would rebuild the soil and would sequester hundreds of billions of tons of CO2. A global forest management program to preserve our old-growth forests will cut CO2 emissions by over 1 billion tons a year. Returning federally owned lands to the wild would give species an adequate habitat where they could survive. We are at a turning point now. There is much work to do. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our children and grandchildren to act. Please take that first small step by passing Bill 4416. Thank you.
Ms. Hill, you get the last word.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Reva Hill. I live in Gaithersburg and I'm a resident of Montgomery County. I want to thank the members for considering this bill and listening to all of us. I'm here on behalf of my children and grandchildren, whom I call my sweeties, even the boys. I'm particularly here on behalf of my college-age son, Jackson, who is now finishing up his last year of engineering at UMD. One day, when he was still in high school, we were on a long drive as a family, and Jackson's voice came quietly from the back seat. "I'm worried, Mom," he said. He was worried about climate change. For the next hour, he continued in the same low-keyed tone. He tends to use that tone when something concerns him a great deal. This is the tone scientists are using, but don't think it means they aren't worried. Jackson knows his science, and so he talked about details and complexities, both of the symptoms of climate change and the solutions. Every mother here will recognize what he was doing. He was handing his worry over to me because it is difficult enough to be a young person trying to figure out how to grow into an adult without having something as monumental as climate change and adults not dealing with it. Jackson is not a dramatic or gloomy person by nature. Still young, I thought, and I decided to investigate. I thought I would be able to come back to him and say, sure, there's a problem, but we've plenty of time to get our acts together and take care of it. I was wrong. We are running out of time. If we continue business as usual, these young people will be living in a world trying to build lives and families as the consequences grow more and more serious. Some of the other members have talked about those consequences. Scientists say that to have even a 2/3 chance of staying below a global increase of 2 degrees Celsius, which is maybe even a little over what we need to stay under for the least serious, for the consequences not to get too serious. To stay under 2 degrees Celsius, we can release 800 gigatons more CO2 into the atmosphere. That's our budget forever. That is it. But Reichstad, a well-respected Washington think tank, did the numbers on existing fossil fuel resources. The data shows coal mines and oil and gas currently in operation worldwide contain 942 tons.
Ms. Hill?
Gigatons. Am I over?
You are so over.
Am I? Oh, well.
I mean, you're wonderful, but you're over.
Okay, well, can I say a couple more things?
No, you can say...
Like 2 sentences.
No. One sentence. I'll give you one.
2. I'm the last person. I'm ready. We adults have choices to make now. It's up to us. We have choices. For my sweeties, and all our sweeties, and Jackson, please, I ask Montgomery County government to do its part in aligning our investments with our values and with a strong future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank everybody for being here this evening. We will take this matter up in probably early February, and so stay tuned. Stay involved.